NBA gears up for its most important game of the season in a true test of the NBA Cup effect. Plus, the Bills Stadium is going to cost a prettier penny than planned. Beyonce gets a halftime show, and later we're hearing from a Detroit Lion on the team's scorching start. It's Tuesday, November 19th. I'm John Shames, and this is Front Office Sports Today. In today's episode, we sit down with FOS reporter Colin Salao to discuss tonight's marquee NBA Cup game between the Celtics and the Cavaliers and why its TV ratings will be an important litmus test for the league. We also hear from Kerby Joseph, safety from the newly Super Bowl favorite Detroit Lions, who offers an inside look into Dan Campbell's locker room and how the team is navigating the toughest division in sports. We're also getting into details of the Bills' new stadium and its new price tag, and an early win for Netflix's Christmas Day games. First, here are your top headlines. The Daniel Jones era seems to be over in New York. The New York Giants announced they are benching Jones after a 20-17 overtime loss to the Carolina Panthers in Germany 2 weekends ago. Backup QB and hometown hero Tommy DeVito will start next week's game against the Buccaneers and presumably for the rest of the season. The Carolina Panthers have only seen 3 wins this season against the Raiders, Saints, and Giants, and each win resulted in the opposing team's firing of their offensive coordinator, head coach, and the benching of their quarterback, respectively. From the gridiron over to the pitch, Tottenham Hotspur's Rodrigo Bentancur received a 7-game suspension from the Premier League after making a racially insensitive comment towards his teammate Son Heung-min. The comments were made back in June during an interview in his home country of Uruguay. The interviewee asked Bentancur for a player's jersey, to which Bentancur responded, "Sonny's? It could be Sonny's cousin too, as they all look the same." Bentancur wrote a public apology on social media, to which Son publicly offered his forgiveness, saying, quote, "He made a mistake, he knows this, and he's apologized. We're brothers and nothing has changed at all." But sticking with the let's be careful of what we say trend, the NBA fined LaMelo Ball $100,000 for making it a, quote, offensive and derogatory comment following the Hornets' 115-114 win over the Milwaukee Bucks on Saturday. During a press conference after the game, Hornets head coach Charles Lee said that Ball was very apologetic, and Ball followed up with reporters saying that he's got, quote, love for everybody and that he doesn't discriminate. In that same game between the Bucks and the Hornets, Milwaukee head coach Doc Rivers was fined $25,000 for publicly criticizing NBA officials. Rivers ripped the crew after the game over a phantom call on Giannis, saying, quote, "There was clearly not a foul. When you watch the video, the ref was blocked out by one of our players. You can't guess at the end of the game." Referee crew chief Curtis Blair told reporters that, quote, "During live play, we called an illegal leg-to-leg contact. During the post-game review, when we looked at the play, there was no illegal contact on the play." Whether or not it was the correct call, the NBA is quick to levy fines for criticizing officials and pressers. Rivers should know better, or he does and just doesn't care. From 2 struggling teams in the East to one of the best we've seen in years, the Cleveland Cavaliers are off to a 15-0 start. They became only the 4th team in NBA history to start the season with 15 straight wins after beating the Hornets 128-114 on Monday night. That win came despite resting superstar Donovan Mitchell. The Cavs face a strong test tonight against the reigning champion Boston Celtics in an NBA group stage matchup. Can this big cup game capture fan interest in an otherwise down year for NBA ratings? We'll have more on that up next with our reporter Colin Salao after this. All right, I'm joined now by front office reporter Colin Salao, here to talk about some NBA. You know the boys, we're going to dive into NBA today, Colin, and it works out well because we've got a marquee matchup tonight, arguably the best game of the regular season so far. The Celtics and the Cavaliers squaring off. The reigning champs facing off against the best team in the NBA so far. First of all, it's great to be here with you, Colin, but I got to ask you, let's just open it up right away. Cleveland Cavaliers, you've watched this season. Are you impressed? Do you buy in? Is this team for real? And are they a contender, on the same level of the Celtics?
Well, yeah, John, I'm glad to be here. And I think to answer your question, it's hard to make that assessment in terms of where they're going to be in the playoffs, because for the last couple of years in the playoffs, they haven't performed up to par. But the way that they've been playing this year, they're leading the league, not just obviously in record, but even in point differential. They're, really good with their cutting. They're not just being a 3-point shooting team, but you're not just seeing one-on-one ISO ball with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. So they're showing the signs of a team that could be really good. I can't say right now they're going to be a team that's going to challenge the Celtics, at least when playoff time comes, because they haven't proven it yet. But it's really exciting to see, especially because when you look at the last few teams that have won 15-0 or started seasons this way, they tend to at least make the finals. Shouting out the 24-0 Warriors. So I'm curious to see how they're going to perform in the postseason. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I think the right play here is probably cautiously optimistic. I think, we've seen a handful of NBA teams in the past, 10 years, 20 years even, let's say, starting off with these very hot regular seasons. Some of them tail off during that regular season. Some of them end up winning 60 games and you're a top seed in the playoffs. I think of like the Atlanta Hawks, maybe back around 2014, 2015. And they didn't really do much in the postseason, but man, they were like one of my favorite teams to watch in the regular season. And I think that kind of leads us to a larger and more interesting conversation here, which is the role of the Cleveland Cavaliers in the broader NBA landscape this year. This is not a big market team. Maybe I would say since Donovan Mitchell's come back into town, there's definitely more palpable buzz around them. But this is not the LeBron Cavaliers. They're not on national TV a whole bunch. And I know you have some of the numbers on that. Do you think this is good for the league to have the best team right now coming out of a small market? And do you think maybe that, inspires some confidence in perhaps the new CBA and how it's shaking out, and maybe giving some other small market teams that same level of excitement of, hey, we don't have to be the Lakers. We don't have to be the Knicks for us to have some attention. If we're good, and people are going to tune in for that.
I think, to answer your question, in the short term, I think it's great for the NBA that there's just a story to follow, right? I think there's been kind of a lack of stories so far to start the year. And ultimately, stories are what drive viewers, whether we like it or not. Stars, stories, that's what drives viewership. Small market teams don't tend to be the viewership draws unless they have a big name. I think it was LeBron James with Cleveland the last time. But I still think that it is good in terms of driving viewership, right? In terms of just, hey, there's a team to follow. There's an undefeated storyline. I don't care where this team is from. People are going to watch this game because it's the defending champions against arguably the best team in the league. Now, what will that do long term? I compare it to, it's the same thing as their playoff hopes. I'm kind of optimistic, but cautiously optimistic. You don't really know if Donovan Mitchell is going to drive viewers, right? They haven't proven that yet. But I think ultimately the fact that there's a team like this, hey, maybe later on in the season, they're chasing 65 wins. They're chasing, big win numbers. That's going to be a team to follow no matter who's there. And at least they have a marketable star. They're not just like the Hawks again of, I think, 2015, 2016. They have a Donovan Mitchell and they have a young guy in Mobley. That's, I think, another great thing about this team is that all of their stars, their core four, are 28 and under. So there's time to build around them and a fan base and some excitement around these young guys.
Yeah, that's definitely a part that I don't want to take for granted here is I think young teams and teams who are considered on the upswing and, they're just now hitting their ceiling. Mobley's going to be so good. Garland's going to be so good. Jared Allen, I think, is coming back soon, possibly even tonight. But it's an exciting team, and I think that definitely helps drive the kind of league-wide interest around them. But let's talk about that interest from a numbers perspective. And I think we've seen overall this year, as Dan Roberts, our editor-in-chief, wrote about over the weekend, ratings are down. And the NBA seems very, they've been trying, I think, to stop this slide that's been happening for the past few years, especially in the regular season. Some would argue that, it's a younger audience. You have more people streaming illegally, perhaps. Those numbers aren't counted. There's a lot of debate about the NBA League Pass price point. But obviously, one of the big pushes that the NBA is making to rejuvenate the regular season has been the NBA Cup. And tonight's game between the Celtics and the Cavaliers is an NBA Cup game, and arguably one of the biggest, if not the biggest ever, just considering the teams that are matching up here, the fact that they played in the playoffs last year. The stakes seem high right now. And then, of course, the Cavs going for this, this record start to the season. When you look at, overall, the sentiment around the NBA Cup, I think there was a lot of excitement on it in the first year. This year, it doesn't feel quite as buzzy, but definitely still the idea that like these games feel different when you're watching them on TV, if for no other reason because of the court. Do you think that this game tonight between the Celtics and the Cavaliers as a cup game is both an opportunity for the NBA to kind of flex some of its watching power in the regular season, but also on the flip side, if this does not, glean the viewership that, maybe some people would expect, is that maybe a red flag of like, hey, maybe we really are cooked here in the regular season?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go into conclusions of like if they're cooked, if it doesn't, like bring in the viewers, but I will say that there, I think for me personally, I think the big issue is that this season is just so long. So they can try all they want with an in-season tournament like this, or creating these new storylines. I think that the viewer that we have now, where there's all this different media, where NBA players are still so popular, they're still the most popular athletes that exist, but the palatability of watching a game is just different now, and how people are watching things. It is just different, and I think it's personally, you could solve all the style of play, all the in-season tournaments, you could do all you want, but when the games just don't feel as meaningful because of the value of the playoffs and just how many games there are, then I think that that's going to be the problem. Now, I think the in-season tournament personally is still a good idea. It's just a matter of how can we make it more important. Like I said, it's all about the meaningfulness of these games. Like you said, they do feel a little more important, but I think it's as years go on, how are we going to make this feel more important? How are we going to make it not the All-Star game, basically, where it doesn't matter? How can we make this, will an in-season tournament championship or MVP be part of someone's legacy? Will that catapult someone, and in it not just be about the money? I think if that happens, people will pay more attention. But ultimately, I still think viewership wise, the NBA maybe doesn't really need to worry too much yet, because it still is a big league. But I will say that it's clear that we've kind of stagnated, and they're kind of really looking for something.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wonder too this is a little speculative, but does the role of the IST and this idea that, hey, the regular season is going to become all, so much better, at least in this first half of the year, let's say, when it traditionally has been, really kind of slept on, or fans aren't really plugged in. I wonder if that was like a selling point for the league when they were negotiating these new media rights deals of like, hey, yeah, I know you're here probably primarily for the playoffs. That's where we're going to get most of their numbers. But hey, if we can throw in, a couple million extra views on a random November game or something like that, you got to imagine that's a great selling point. So I do wonder, the timing of them negotiating that TV deal right after such a successful first season, if the in-season tournament, or the NBA Cup as it's called now, doesn't continue to produce those types of numbers, does it almost make it like not a bad investment for these other companies because you're still owning NBA rights? But is that maybe part of the expectation of what we think, ESPN or Disney and were signing up for when they got a slice of the rights?
I think it's easy to say that from the outset, right? But if I'm looking at it, first of all, the first day of NBA Cup viewership this year was up 70% versus last year. Granted, the games were more exciting. You had the Klay Thompson return to Golden State. But again, I go back to stories driving viewership, not necessarily the label of NBA Cup, right? But I think that if you look at the NBA Cup next in the coming years and the deal that they signed, it's going to Amazon. So I think that when you're looking at it that way, Amazon, they're happy. First of all, they have deep pockets, but I think they're happy to be like, hey, we don't need the same viewership right now as the big networks do, but we need to kind of identify with people that they can go to our platform and watch big time games here. I think that 11-year contract, maybe the first half of that is not necessarily looking at massive viewership, but more bringing people onto the platform and making them realize that you can watch these big games on Amazon, and proving as well, as we've seen with Netflix, that people will go to these platforms to watch games. So where I stand is, yeah, the viewership might dip. I wouldn't be shocked if it's not as big as people write and as people think. And we're going to be writing about how, the numbers are low or all of that stuff. But I think internally, those folks, they're probably not that nervous, given where the world of media is right now, and as well how deep the pockets of Amazon are.
Yeah, and just last point on that, you got to think too, right? If nothing else, even if the viewership is not up to par with the first year or the first game of this year that was such a success, I still think it's probably a net positive for the league when you have the Cavaliers getting on national TV, when you have maybe even like a team like the Pistons who are, performing better than expected this year, and or your Wizards, great example, your Washington Wizards, in a cup game, you get to see more of these faces on TV. And we talk about how this is a face-driven league. It's a star-driven league. If someone sees Jordan Poole go off for 42 points like he did the other night, on national TV, that might be the only time they get to do that. But that's still another face, another star for the league to lean into. And it kind of, I think, if nothing else, the IST probably offers a little bit more attention on the smaller guys and the teams that aren't in such big markets to say, hey, we still have stars. We still have good basketball. We have basketball that's worth watching. And I think that's got to be a net positive overall for the league.
Yeah, and to drive your point further, there's nothing better. There's no better example than last year with Tyrese Halliburton and the Pacers, right? They made the finals of the IST, and Tyrese Halliburton played his best basketball during that period, that stretch. Has he been so good lately? Not as much, but I think ultimately fans want to watch him now. They recognize that he's a star player, at least casual fans do. And that's, like you said, they've built a new star in a small market in Indiana. Who could that be this year? Maybe it's the Cavs because they're not losing games. But, there's also a bunch of other teams that could step up. Houston maybe that is young and up and coming. And then you could build that star, particularly an American star, that will help with viewership as we move along.
Colin, always a great chat with you, man. Thanks for coming on. We'll leave it there, but enjoy the game tonight.
Of course, John. Always a pleasure to be here.
The Buffalo Bills have an exciting new stadium coming in 2026, but the price is going to be significantly higher than was originally budgeted for. When the project was announced in 2023, it came with the price tag of $1.53 billion. Nothing to shake a stick at in and of itself. But now, just about 17 months later, that number has eclipsed $2 billion, according to the latest estimates. That's more than $560 million in overruns, mostly due to increased labor and material costs. As is the case with many stadium projects, the total cost is being divided between ownership and the taxpayers. New York State has contributed $600 million to this project, which includes $250 million from Erie County. However, when it comes to the overruns, that's falling all on the wallets of owners Kim and Terry Pegula, also the parents of American tennis star Jessica Pegula, if you did not know. But members of the Bills front office affirmed their owners' commitment despite the cost, saying the Pegulas will not deviate from building a best-in-class stadium in Buffalo, according to one team official. The stadium is still expected to be ready by June of 2026. The Pop-Tarts Bowl has quickly emerged as a fan favorite during bowl season, perhaps best remembered last year for its spectacle of the winning team eating the mascot, a frosted strawberry Pop-Tart. This year, they're bringing edible mascots back, but with some increased variety. There will now be 3 flavors and 3 mascots: frosted hot fudge sundae, frosted wild berry, and a mystery flavor that's quote-unquote coming from the vault. And then the MVP of the game will get to choose which one of those flavors gets eaten. But here, listen, all I'm going to say is if frosted hot fudge sundae doesn't get chosen, what are we doing, man? What are we doing? Wild berry? Perhaps the worst Pop-Tart flavor out there, period. Nobody's ever like, wow, I'm really craving a wild berry Pop-Tart. I mean, come on. But with that said, I do feel like there is some serious intrigue over the mystery flavor, especially if it's a flavor that had been previously retired. But the one thing about that to remember is whatever flavor it is, the folks upstairs at Big Pop-Tart decided society would be better off without it. So my initial point stands: frosted hot fudge sundae has got to be the choice. For the first time ever, the Detroit Lions are Super Bowl favorites. Up next, Owen sits down with Lions safety Kerby Joseph to understand the team's secret sauce and how they're ushering in the new era of Detroit sports.
Joined now by Detroit Lions safety Kerby Joseph. Welcome, Kerby. Yo, appreciate it for having me, man. I just want to say, man, all glory to God.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And thanks so much for joining. So the Lions have been really good this year. You joined the team in 2022 when it was kind of coming out of a rough patch. What's the energy been like this season?
Like super, like this is like super amazing. Like energy's just been all over the place. Like I mean, like we just had certain points of the season where we got Amara standing on his head for celebrations and stuff like that, and just certain points of the season. Just the energy's just fulfilling.
Yeah, it sounds like you can just like have fun with it right now
Right,
because
yeah,
like,
like it's just joyful,
you know,
just everybody's having
yeah, that's
fun.
great. Yeah, I mean that is what it's supposed to be. Sports.
Right.
That's why we play sports in the first place. Do you feel like the team's relationship to Detroit has evolved as you've established yourself as a real contender?
Definitely. I feel like even when we weren't contenders, I feel like the city has always believed in us. So like now that we're contenders, I feel like man, that just shows everything that we put in the work and just the support that we get from our fans and from the city. Like it just means everything to us.
Yeah, yeah, very cool. And what's it been like, in your division? It's probably the toughest division in the NFL, partly because you're there, but also like there's no easy outs there. Um, so yeah, what's does it just like feel like I don't know, like more of a playoff atmosphere when you play teams in that division?
I feel like it's great. I feel like in this division, I feel like we have great competition. Like, and I feel like competition brings the best out of people. You know what I'm saying? So just having like talent on the other side of the ball to really like compete at the full content, like to your full like capability. I feel like that just brings the best out of you and embrace your best play.
hmm And I'm sort of curious to get a sense of like what it's like being a safety. I've talked to actually a bunch of linebackers, and them, it's like they're kind of smashing into each other every single play. With you guys, you're doing most of the you're the ones tackling. Or I guess you get blocked sometimes, but you're more the ones delivering the hits than receiving them. When you think about just like who's banged up at the end of the game, how you feel at the end of the game, is it still like a very physically grueling position that you need the full week to recover for?
For sure, for sure. Safety, you got to be very physical. Like I said, I feel like safety is like the hardest position on the defense. You know what I mean? Like I feel like safety, you kind of got to mix between corner and linebacker because sometimes you have to cover and sometimes you have to fill in gaps and run support and stuff like that. And you always like making tackles. And I feel like, when you're making tackles on running backs, I mean, I feel like once you're making a tackle, I feel like they already got like, a good couple of steps already. Like they got their speed going on, you know what I'm saying? So like I feel like, we got them when they're like how should I say like they're running pretty fast when by the time they get to the safeties and stuff like that. So when we got to tackle them, I just feel like, what I'm saying, it's just we got to be a lot physical, a lot more physical.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, they've got a lot of momentum going. It's
Yeah, a
a
lot of
lot of
momentum and stuff like that. Yeah.
yeah. Um, and along those lines, how would you feel about like the NFL adding an potentially an 18th game, which seems like something they're pretty intent on doing?
Nah, they gotta chill, man.
It's too much
Just
already.
keep, yeah, just keep it how it is. Like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, just keep it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's sort of this interesting thing you got in the league going right now where it's like the NFL is making so much money. It's the most popular league in the US,
Right,
arguably in the world. And so there's so many opportunities to make even more money, like by going to Europe, by playing a Christmas game, by Black Fridays, now something we're
right,
sort of used to, but each of those things adds a little bit more on the players.
right.
Um, but it's only like a little bit at a time. Do you feel like we're at the risk of, potentially going too far with that?
Yeah, because I want to say like, football is my everything, but sometimes you kind of need your time away from it to really like recuperate and like prepare mentally and stuff like that for the next season. I feel like we're constantly playing football like every day for what is it, 16 weeks straight. So it's
Mhm.
like you need that time, and I feel like that 18th game is just gonna take away from like more time in the off season where we only get like 3 months to ourselves. And if
Mhm.
you go to the Super Bowl, you get even less than that. So it's just like, I mean, there's nothing wrong with the season, how long it is now. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like you might as well just keep it. I don't see anything beneficial of adding an extra game.
Uh-huh. Um, as long as we're on some changes here, new kickoff rule, pro or anti?
Uh, I don't like it because I like to for kickoff, I like to just run,
Hmm.
and have the momentum and all that. But now I feel like you don't get as much momentum. Um, yeah, I just feel like it was more exciting when like you were running a
Yeah.
lot full speed from the jump instead of like having that little margin. I just feel like I don't have no problem with the kickoff rules. It's just the penalties, like the way you get penalized for stuff. Like if you don't make it, it's like they start at the 30, right? How's it? They start
Yeah,
at the
right. Yeah, I'm still getting used to all the different like,
yeah,
if
like
you're
I
like
just feel
it's in
like
the
that's
end
a
zone, you
lot.
go
That's
here.
like that's too much yardage to give up. Just because you didn't make it into the landing zone, or if you got it in a touchback. You know what I'm saying? Like I just feel like that's a
Hmm.
lot. I feel like they could just like if anything, just you could still start at the 25. Ain't nothing wrong with the 25. Like start them at
Hmm.
the 25. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, I mean, along those lines, I feel like the NFL's a lot of the changes they've made over the years have been to kind of tilt the playing field toward offense because fans like offense. It's exciting to see points, in a in a 6-3 game. People might start to lose interest. Do you feel like as a defensive player, like the field is kind of tilted against you?
oh, for sure, for sure. They definitely trying to make this into an offensive league for sure. But I feel like the one thing defensive guys have, like an advantage of is fear. You
Hmm.
put the fear in your opponent. So that's the only thing we really got, and that's fine. That's fine with me. I feel like we just got to use that to our full content.
Yeah, and actually, I'm just curious you to say more about that. If do you feel like there are certain players where you can just get in their heads, like as much as you're just like physically trying to take them down, like you also have this like mental, emotional advantage over them because like you're coming for them.
For sure. I feel like you could definitely get in people's heads. I mean, we're all human, you know what I'm saying? But you said it right then to the right person. You could definitely get in their head and throw their game off. I feel
Hmm.
like football is also a physical sport, but it's also a mental sport. So the more you could get in your opponent's head, I feel like you could throw them off their game for sure.
Yeah, how much trash talking happens in a typical game?
Uh, Nobody really talks for real. I'm into certain guys, yeah, but not really. Like not really. You know.
Hmm. Yeah, and getting back to like what it's like being a safety, safety contracts are the high end. On the hand, we're getting up into 20 million per year. Do you feel like it's a position that's being appropriately valued by the league right now?
Ah man, they gotta pay, man. They gotta pay the safeties, man. You know what I'm saying? They gotta like, up their little cap space or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? They gotta make sure, they like the safeties are like essentially like the quarterbacks on the defense. You know what I'm saying? So I
Hmm.
really feel like the safeties should be getting paid as much as the quarterbacks do on offense.
Interesting. So you'd say, I mean, the top quarterbacks are making like 50 million a year.
50 million.
Is that you think that's the safeties should be getting that too?
Yeah, man. Yeah, we the quarterback of the defense, right? Quarterback on offense get 50 millions. Safety on the defense, quarterback
All right.
on that
Um,
50 ball.
I mean, along those lines, I believe you've got one more year, right, on your rookie contract. Are you starting to feel? I mean, it's still a long time, but you're starting to think about what that's going to be like to, negotiate your first major deal.
Honestly, I'm not too much worried about that. I'm focused on the season at hand and the next game. I let all that happen when it happens. When it's time for that, it happens. But I don't try to keep my mind on that. I try to worry about other stuff.
Hmm.
I try to be with
And
my feet at.
yeah, that makes sense. Are you kind of like in regular touch with your agent, just on like I don't know how things are going, and just like any concerns you have, or does that kind of come a little bit later?
Man, I tell him, man, that's his job, man. You handle all that stuff. My job is the field, man. I'm gonna focus on what I gotta focus on in the field, and all the other negotiation contract stuff, man. I let it be what it be. I let him focus on all that.
Yeah, makes sense. Um, and if you could make one change to the NFL, what would you like to do?
Uh the leg covering. I feel like I want to start a petition for real to take off the leg covering for the uniform because we also get fined for that. I think it's like a couple grand. But I feel like we shouldn't have to cover our leg skin. I don't see any benefit of it, but also I do see harm of it because sometimes when I be in the game, I be catching leg cramps. And
Hmm.
like guys, I know other guys where they be catching leg cramps, and I feel like it's just a safety hazard.
Yeah, so your full legs have to be covered, like they can't see any of your actual leg in the games.
Right.
That's what you're saying?
Right. And I feel like just the compression, like if you don't wear tights, you gotta wear socks. And I feel like just the compression from the socks, I feel like it's just like it's too compressed with the legs, and I feel like that alters the game, you know?
All right, words to live by. Kerby Joseph, thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Appreciate you for having me.
Now, time for Front Office Sports Tomorrow, where we look ahead to the biggest stories coming up in the business of sports. Beyonce is performing at the halftime show. No, not the halftime show for Super Bowl 59, but rather the Texans-Raven game on Christmas Day that will be a part of the Netflix games. It's great for the first-time NFL broadcaster in Netflix, who's now secured the face of the second most watched Super Bowl halftime show ever. Beyonce will reportedly perform off of her recent album, Cowboy Carter, which she teased in an Instagram post on Sunday night. The project marked the best album debut of 2024, according to Rolling Stone, opening with more than 407,000 units. It makes a ton of sense for Netflix to be going after the best of the best. As FOS tuned-in columnist Mike McCarthy said earlier this week, the NFL does not tolerate amateurism on its broadcasts, first time or not. Following the tech issues from the Tyson-Paul fight this past weekend, there's been plenty of questions about Netflix's level of preparation ahead of the Christmas Day slate. While we'll all have to wait and see there, one thing is for sure, that halftime show is going to be rocking for whoever can see it. That's it for today. Leave us a rating and a review wherever you like to tune in, or send a friend your favorite part of the show. Owen will be back tomorrow, but thanks for listening. We'll see you then.